Hey everybody, it's Bill from Matt-Trakker.com and welcome to this episode of Behind the Mask. In this episode today, I'm joined by Graeme McKenna. If you don't know who this is, well, it's because when we were younger, we didn't know that the characters that we loved were voiced by people. So Graeme is Brad Turner and T-Bob and a couple other characters in the show. But before we really dig into, M.A.S.K and how you got started in acting, I know this is a very, very open, vague question, but since M.A.S.K has ended, what have you been up to? And you don't have to go through your entire life, like dissertation wise.
Oh, no, really. I had no life after M.A.S.K. That was it. It was the highlight. And after that, it was all downhill. So nothing really to say. What a long, strange trip it's been. We were all in Los Angeles back in those days, and now I find myself in Brooklyn. So I've certainly traversed some geographic areas since then. Done a lot of different things since M.A.S.K. I think probably some of the most fun things I did was work on films like Armageddon and stuff that I got to do in LA. That was pretty cool. And then went into some directing and venue management, and now I refer to myself as a flower bitch because my fiance runs a floral design studio, and I just work for her. So there's an arc of a career for you.
Well, it's at least you're keeping busy with it. I mean, and if that's a self-giving title. Is that on your cards too, like your business cards?
No, that's my business cards. I have T-shirts that say it. The whole 9 yards,
So let's talk a little bit about your early days with M.A.S.K and how you got started. I know when we did the text interview many years ago.
Many years ago.
It was so interesting to read, like how you got started and how you got to where you were. And I don't know if you don't mind a recap for people that don't like to read. If you wouldn't mind, I would.
No, not at all. And I got into acting early when I was about 13 or 14. Actually, my first paying job was a voiceover that I did for Crawley Films in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, which is where I'm originally from. And it was a religion to me as a kid. The idea of being an actor, I couldn't think or see of anything else but that, and I got involved. I guess probably one of the most interesting things is that I immigrated to the United States by horse and wagon. So I actually was with a company that traveled by horse and wagon, and we came down through the central British Columbia, the Okanagan Valley, crossed into eastern Washington, and then went all the way down into Eugene, Oregon. And then I traveled to Los Angeles from that caravan, and it was actually called the Caravan Stage Company. An incredible experience. I always said it was like moving at the speed of nature when you travel by horseback. So
how old were you at that point?
I was about 25, I think, at that point. And I'd kind of stumbled into that job. I'd actually moved back into my parents' place back in Ottawa when the job popped up because someone had gotten sick that had been cast in the tour, and I had auditioned for it, hadn't made it, and they called me up and said, "Hey, are you still interested?" And I said, "Yes, get me out of my parents' basement," and flew me out to Vancouver, and I did the tour, and then we took a bus from Eugene, Oregon, with $150 in my pocket. There's a bus, and I don't know if it still exists, called the Green Tortoise, and the Green Tortoise is a bus that has no seats. It's just one big bed. And everybody can bring whatever food, alcohol, or other substances they want on the bus. And you just pass your mixtape up to the front of the bus and they play it all the way through as it travels through Oregon into Los Angeles. Huh. So I remember getting on this bus with my wife at the time, a dog and a parrot, and traveling, for hours on end, arriving in Los Angeles, in November, and just being truly having been transported into another world. The first time I saw palm trees at Christmas was just bizarre to me. So
I've been in Florida for Christmas time, and it's weird. I will.
It just seems a little unnatural, having been used to the great white winters of the Canadian North. It certainly was a bit of a culture shock in many ways. But yeah. So I that's sort of how I found my way to LA, and then In respect to M.A.S.K, as I think I said in the written questions you had, we had this funky house in Echo Park that we were living in. My next door neighbor was Brandon Lee, and hell of a guy, and we looked. Our apartment overlooked another house, and there was this guy that was fixing the roof of the house. Turned out he was a guy from Czechoslovakia. He was an actor. He found out that I was Canadian and said, I heard through my agent that they were doing auditions for Canadian actors to do a voiceover for a cartoon series. So, he gave me his number. I called up his agent, and they set up an audition. And the next thing I was auditioning for M.A.S.K and involved. So,
do you remember why they wanted Canadian actors?
Money. It was all about money.
Was it like a union thing, or?
Yeah, I don't think it had to do with the fact that they thought the Canadians were such greater voiceover actors that they had to go up north.
I never thought to ask the question, but it always comes up.
I think it was predominantly, it costs huge amounts of money to produce these things. It's not just the actors, of course, it's the storyboard artists, it's the writers, So when a production company can find a way, and certainly I'd have to say that Canadian actors and American actors are comparable as far as their degree of talent. There was no reason for them not to take advantage of the fact that they could get a better deal financially by hiring Canadians in LA, which is, I think, how they approached it,
It's just a weird dynamic, you never really, like, as an outsider, you would never think of that as a business practice.
No, and it's sort of that funny balance between here you have, in any kind of medium, it's creative, it's artistic, but it is also a business.
Yeah.
It's also, there's lots of money involved. So those kind of things which sort of seem odd on face value become very, make a lot of sense when you're looking at the bottom line from a business standpoint.
Yes, it is weird, but so, all right. So M.A.S.K, you're doing the audition. Do you remember how they had you audition? Did you read off certain?
It's funny. I remember the auditions as sort of being like one of those bad cop movies where I was pulled into one of those little tiny rooms, with a desk on, and the producer, I think Marcia Goodman, I think was the name of the lady that auditioned me. Very nice lady. But I was in this little tiny room and sort of doing these voices that I recall. And I, outside of that, I know the other people did a lot of auditions. I think I just did one. I don't even think there was a callback that I recall. It's a long time ago, but
you were just that good then.
Yeah. Don't know that was the case. I think I just got lucky, as I often did.
So, as a voice actor, even before, all of you on the cast were doing multiple voices, did you have multiple voices in your repertoire already? Like,
no, I was the least seasoned of all the actors. I mean, Brandon and Sharon and Doug and had all had previous experience. When you work as an actor, obviously the voice is a hugely integral part of what you're doing. So I had work as on my voice as an actor, but to do the kind of things that voiceover actors do, I was pretty much the amateur of the group. The idea that, you can get people that go in there and they're asked to make such subtle little changes, just imagine that you have a pinprick of a point on your ear. How would that change your voice? And these guys will do it. You could swear that you could feel the pinprick on their ear. They're able to make the adjustments that subtly. Mine were certainly more broader. And of course, I think if you look at the difference between T-Bob and Brad, you can see that,
I can hear a little bit of Brad in your voice. Is Brad close to your natural voice?
Yes. Yeah. Brad was, I think a little higher pitch than my voice has settled over the years, but, Brad was nothing to it, but to do it. It was just that brighter sort of lighter sort of thing,
I can hear it. I can hear it as we're talking. I can kind of put it all together. I always find it interesting, listening to, whenever, when I talk with Mark and Doug and Sharon and Brendan over the years, and even Brennan, back, that was even a long time ago too. It's always interesting to hear about how, it came to be and how the voices kind of stuck essentially. And there's a distinct difference in some of T-Bob's voice work in the cartoon. And I know that I know that you credit Stu Rosen with helping you a lot on that. And I was wondering if you could go in a little bit about how Stu was able to help you move that along, because there's like a lower pitch version and then you have the higher pitch. And I would imagine that there was some manipulation with the audio, unless you can produce it.
I don't think so. Not to my knowledge. I
think really?
The voice break, which distinguished that part, was sort of that adolescent feel. Okay. The kid that can't quite, get the voice, is registered right. Flicking.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No, I credit Stu with that, because one of the things that happened is very early on. I'm not even sure if we recorded the first episode or not. And I know that there was at least one other actor that had been hired that wasn't retained. But I remember being in a very dark, small voiceover booth. And if you've ever worked in voiceover, usually what there is there's the recording engineers on one side of the glass and the actors that are on the other side of the glass, because it's a sealed room and acoustically modulated so that you don't hear any echoes or anything else. And we were in that room standing there, and on the other side of the room was like, the person who had been directing, about 4 or 5 people from DIC, from DEEK. And they were all pointing and talking very animatedly. And we didn't know, I didn't know who half these people were, but there was this whole thing going on. None of us, at least I didn't know what was going on in there. One of those people was Stu Rosen. And unbeknownst to me, was that they were unsatisfied with at least some of the voices, one of them being mine. And all of a sudden, you can't hear, there's no sound between the two unless they press this talk button. And they pressed the talk button. They said, "Graeme, would you please come in here for a moment?" So I walk into the room, the audio booth, and there's all these people. And when I walk in, Stu grabbed me by the shoulder and very quietly said into my ear, he said, "Just do what I ask you to do." He said, "Don't worry." And so he said, he turned to them all. He said, "Okay, so here's how I would approach this." And he had me do this voice. He says, "Try to break the register." And he gave me a couple of quick directions, had me do it a couple of quick times, said, "Great, do it again, terrific, thank you so much." And then he turned around back to them and said, "You see, that's all it's going to take." And that's how ultimately, in my estimation, he saved my ass, and he worked with me afterwards. He worked with me afterwards on the voice and helped me to sort of establish something that would be distinct in respect to that. And as a young actor that didn't have the chops that Doug did and that Mark did, to be able to do the kind of work that was going to be necessary, it made a big, big difference to have someone of Stu's caliber, be willing, sight unseen, didn't know me from Adam and could have easily just fired me and hired somebody else, be willing to give me that shot and give me that opportunity. So
yeah, it seems like you saw something and really, really believed in what you were doing. So
well, Stu and I became close friends afterwards as a result of that. And as I say, I've often felt that I owed him that opportunity, and it really was doing, 65 of what we did. I think we did 70 some odd episodes in the end, and getting to work with Brandon, with Sharon, with, Doug, with Mark, people who had experience, and then Stu. Was a real lesson for me and a real opportunity that, you get to actually learn in real life. And that I was very grateful for that. Not as grateful at the time as I should have been, but in hindsight, certainly far more so now.
I found, so Mark uploaded to he has this very obscure, no subscriber YouTube channel, and he uploaded him on, I forget the name of the show, but it was him against Sinbad for doing comedy work.
Oh wow!
And I was like, well, here's where Sly Rax came from. It's he had this, and I don't remember, he couldn't remember if it was before or after, but I was like, the Jack Nicholson impression was like, I was like, that's not Jack Nicholson, that's Sly Rax. And he's like, it's interesting that you hear that where other people would hear Jack Nicholson. So I
would hear Jack Nicholson. Yeah.
And obviously he played, he had more of a broader range with the characters. I think you were credited with the main characters were T-Bob, Brad, Calhoun, and Julio Lopez. And I'm sure, like everybody else in the cast, I'm sure you played Soldier number 2 or, something along those lines. when you had to switch to those characters, was there any direction with those, or was it just kind of do we feel?
Well, there were storyboards. There were that we knew characteristics of the characters we were being asked to play. I mean, in the case of Calhoun, there were accents in Julio Lopez, which let's not talk about because, it's like I had no business, as a white boy from Canada doing Julio Lopez on a cartoon series. It's just embarrassing to be able to say that happened. But nonetheless, we were given direction in respect to the qualities that the characters would possess, accents if that was the case, or distinctive qualities that might impact the voice. Then we were given the opportunity to experiment with what we thought might fit, and then the directors, the producers, the people would obviously make a judgment call as to whether or not they felt that embodied the character as the vision ultimately had it. So there was range to go in. I mean, I think people again like Mark, who is a skilled impressionist. You could have asked me to try Rax, but I can't do Jack Nicholson. I can't even do a version of Jack Nicholson. Whereas Mark has that capability as a performer to modulate his voice to sound like that. And in some cases, I think you're right. I think it isn't Jack Nicholson. It's Mark's interpretation of how Rax would sound if he had that kind of bent on Jack Nicholson. And that's what I mean about the subtleties that people with that professional expertise, can do.
Well, the four major characters that you played, there was definitely a distinction in all the voices. I thought, and I'm glad I asked the question, I thought T-Bob was altered. I didn't know that was just like your voice directly. So I thought there was like some alteration to get that pitch higher, to be honest.
No, just the crossing of one's legs while one works, can sometimes have incredible impact, on how you get to certain registers. But no, I don't think any of the voices. I mean, I don't believe they modulated Sharon's as the computer either.
Really?
I don't think so. I mean, and if they were, we weren't certainly aware of that. And I have to admit, I've only seen a few of the cartoon series, the episodes, but I don't believe I heard anything that made me think, oh, geez, they did that to my voice. So if they did tweak, it was certainly not something I was aware of.
Well, let's talk about a character that, let's talk about Brad for a minute, or 10, however it goes. Brad is usually a character that a lot of people that I talk to, whether it's through this channel, website, social media, etc. Brad is one of the characters that everybody gravitates to and actually remembers more than Matt or Miles Mayhem.
Oh, yeah. Let's be honest. We all respect and love Matt, but we want to be Brad.
Yeah, no, you're not.
Brad's
not
the coolest, Brad's the cool. I love that I got that character, from that standpoint.
He embodied being cool, and I was surprised that when I did an episode count, it was only in 26 episodes, and I felt like there were more of him. But I know he stretched into the racing season 2 as well. But as Brad, did you have any input on his character at all, or were you strictly? I know you said before you had you can give some input and things of that nature, but was there anything you were able to emphasize for that character?
I think probably one of the reasons why I got Brad was the one thing I was outside of Brendan was the youngest. And I think Brad had a youthful quality that was part of the character. Okay. And again, without having to have a lot of great acting skills, not to say that I wasn't capable of what I was doing, I was, but I had that youthful quality because I was, in my 20s, and so it certainly in that respect, I think I was lucky that my voice connected to the character naturally.
So it was either going to be you or Brennan.
Yeah, really, yeah. And I'm sorry, age-wise, I had it all over Brennan.
Yeah, a 25-year-old or a 14-year-old or
a 14-year-old. And let's be honest, something. Brad was a little bit closer. Yeah, no. So you didn't. And as I said, we the characters are the creations of the writers.
Correct.
And the people that conceptualize the whole thing to begin with. What we're trying to do is, as best we can as actors, is to embody the quality of those characters as they're laid out to us, not necessarily to change them, perhaps in some cases give an interpretation, a coloring that can be said to be, our interpretation. But it really is to try to embody what we're being given so that we accurately reflect what the writers have conceived.
The character of Brad always seemed to have, like, and you just said you haven't really, gone back and watched too many, but Brad always seemed to have a real, like, pure of heart mentality. And while, he was a cool guy, in a rock band and things of that nature, it always seemed like that character was as dependable as it can get. And he was always there to lend a hand and to really be a team player. And sometimes another character that you play, T-Bob, who appeared in 66 episodes, which I think...
how did that happen?
I think, if I remember correctly, it's either first or third out of all the characters, like between like Matt, Miles, and T-Bob. I think that was the range. When I started like recollecting and kind of rewatching, this was way back in the day, the character I found to be annoying because it felt like it was in the way a little bit or something along those lines. But as I got a little bit older and more mature, as you can see all the stuff behind me here as I talk about being mature, I grew to realize the importance of the character. It's a grounding stone for Scott. Scott was supposed to allow me to feel like I was part of the team and to allow all the other kids that were watching, as it being a commercial asset, to do that. But you had this dynamic of T-Bob, that you had Scott, who was reckless to a point and always getting into trouble, and you had T-Bob being the anchor. Is that the way you saw T-Bob, like when you were going through it?
I think I think there's a couple of things. I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, T-Bob was really annoying, but I also think you're also very correct, is that he was a foil, in some ways, sort of a conscience, for Scott. Scott is going to do all these reckless things. And if you're trying to tell a story that cautions that kind of recklessness, there's got to be some form of voice there. And there's always Matt as the parental figure, but T-Bob takes on a different kind of foil, and is also the jester, the court fool, the sort of the imbecilic in those moments, and allows, as you say, for not only the comedy, not just comedy or levity, but I think that sort of moral balance, that Scott takes the chance and succeeds. T-Bob, says, "Oh, we shouldn't," and then gets everything and fails, So it's so by both sides of that coin. I also think that the PSAs were a big and important part of the series.
It was some of the more memorable aspects, to be honest.
Well,
they were at the end of the episodes, and they're short, so they're easier to remember than a full episode, so to speak. But they were important. G.I. Joe did them. I think
it was a sign of the times. I think the cartoon series were very much. There was a whole thing about afternoon. Cartoon series for kids had to have some educational element in them. And I don't know if that was mandated or what that was from, but I just remember in that period of time, the PSA was a big deal in a lot of the things. And again, T-Bob provided that sort of that moral foil,
yes,
in the PSAs. And sometimes I wondered if that was simply T-Bob's, point. That was it. It was really to have him be there at the PSAs, and he had to be integrated into the series in some level. I also wondered if it was just a fanboy nod to some form of trying to get an R2-D2 style character in there. I mean, a failed fanboy, I think, because R2-D2, T-Bob is not. But I think he was deliberately an annoying character. I think that was part of what we looked for in the voice, the pitch, the break in the pitch, is sort of grating, He was always getting into trouble. He was always causing a problem. He was always showing the downside of that impulsive action that Scott would take. A cautionary note.
As you were talking, I thought about this before. I was just thinking of how terrible a father Matt is for his kid. Always, he's got this giant mansion. Nobody's in it except for him.
Yeah, he's a latchkey kid. His dad's
and he's getting into trouble all the time, and you have to rely on T-Bob. Like all the stress that poor robot went through because Matt.
And what happened to Scott's mother? I never heard that. I never got that storyline. Why was Matt a single dad? It was sort of that Disney-esque thing that the mothers just seem miraculously to disappear or die somehow. And the young characters are left without a mother.
In a Disney entity, you're most likely dying in the first act. So,
exactly.
it's not really been something that's really been flushed out over time. The cartoon never tackled any of that really. No. And I don't recall the comics doing any of that as well. But like I know the mini comics that came with the toys, they talked about, how M.A.S.K kind of came to be, but there was never an indication of, okay, Matt decided to adopt a child or and he's got 6 tennis courts. What's he doing with his time, and why isn't he watching them? But it's
and T-Bob was certainly not the surrogate mother one would have chosen for his child.
Maybe Matt did. I don't know.
I don't know.
A question that I asked some of the fans of the channel and the show over time, like some questions, and one of the ones that came up was during the call up scenes, Brad's usually on stage and he just darts off. Aside from like Eddie Vedder, I can't think of another front man that would like do that. I'm sure there are a ton of them, but you're a paying customer at a concert, right? And you're there to see Brad Turner. All of a sudden, he just vanishes. What are you doing? How upset are you?
I'm getting my money back. That's for sure. And you wonder about things like that. It's sort of funny because, Brad, embodies this quality of, as you said, the dependable character, the guy that always shows up, the guy you can count on, and yet his alter ego, as it were, is this rock and roll star. And when you think about a rock and roll star, and perhaps this is perspective, having lived through so many, that they're not exactly the kind of people you look at and go, oh, there's a reliable guy. He's fronting a band. I wonder how much drugs and alcohol are involved, in his day job. But so it was sort of odd that they would have him, in the middle of a concert, that would be a quality you'd want to emulate. Millions of fans out there having paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to come and see him, and he goes, "Yeah, sorry, got to go fight Vanessa."
And my giant watch is flashing.
My giant watch flashes, and
yeah, he runs off like he has to go to the bathroom, really, in the middle of a set.
These are these slight contradictory things that I think that for fans of something, we the suspension of disbelief is necessary.
I wonder. I don't think it's ever really been talked about either, but I wonder if that was ever talked about in the comics or anything along those lines. Like, he never finishes a concert. Like, why are people paying to see him? Something like that.
He never finishes a concert.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We've got what's her name who had the wig, wears the wig backward. Perhaps that was his thing. It's like if you ever get to see Brad Turner finish a concert, it's been a miracle.
Yes,
everybody pays just in case,
Did you see him finish the concert? No, not this time. No,
this time. That damn watch went off.
Yeah, I've been to 17 of them, and he finally got through.
I think this is the thing: is sometimes that we've become, I think, we become fans of so many things that we look now for details and things that we used to blow by. I mean, yes, that's a big plot hole, if you want to look at it. But it's that when we're a fan of something, a lot of times we'll let that go by. Nowadays, it would be very difficult to get to have that kind of slide by in a series. I mean, you just wouldn't see it. Mind you, now we've got Morty and Big Mouth and series that we're watching that are just so far removed from what we saw as kids. It's just a whole different situation. But
speaking of, like, when you were growing up, did you have like a favorite cartoon?
Well, I was a big fan of I think it was Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, which I think was the original cartoon. I love that.
Was that the one with
Maybe it wasn't Sam Raimi. I may be wrong on that. If that was
Sam Raimi, he directed the Tobey Maguire movies. I don't know if he was. I don't know if he.
No, I'm misquoting, and I pardon me in my age, I forgot. I don't remember who directed or who.
It was Spider-Man, Iceman, and somebody else, right?
It was very early on, and it was a cartoon series. I think the original Spider-Man cartoon series, as I recall, and I was watching this in the '60s and the '70s.
Okay, I remember.
Maybe it was
Spider-Man.
I should have looked that up.
Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, I think.
The Amazing Spider-Man.
That might be it.
Was it? But
I'm trying to remember.
But and I liked I mean, Spider-Man has always been one of my favorite characters. I mean, I certainly like the graphic novel Dark Knight series, but I've always been upset with the turn that they've making on Spider-Man. I mean, the Spider-Man that I enjoyed never got the girl. Was never known for anything, never succeeded in his alter ego, was completely and utterly pathetic as a person, and the only reason why J. Jonah Jameson even noticed him was because he got photographs of Spider-Man. Wouldn't even have known his name if it hadn't been for that fact. And they've turned him into this. It was very dark. It was very that sort of isolation that someone who feels that they're capable of something that no one can appreciate, feels that who and what he is was a geek.
And I think that's how Stan Lee, that's how Stan Lee really wanted him to be envisioned. He wanted us to be able to be, thought of. Like maybe you have that kind of same mentality where life's hard, and it's probably the same thing for a lot of people. But you can see yourself as Peter Parker, and all their 10,000 iterations of Spider-Man that have been out there. But I remember watching Spider-Man. Like in the 90s or something along those lines. And he was always chasing after Mary Jane and never, it was like this never ending cycle that never really completed. But Spider-Man's always been one of my favorites too. And I went to a local comic book shop and a guy was there trying to sell the owner Spider-Man's first appearance. It was Amazing Fantasy, and I was like, "Can I hold that?" And he's like, "Yeah, here." So I have a picture of me holding that, and then the one with him. I think he's in a tube with the Fantastic Four, but he's like, "Yeah, I found him in my attic. I was just trying to get rid of it." I was like, "Oh, can I have?" I was like, it just so happened that happenstance, literally 2 miles from my house, I was able to pick up and hold the first appearance of Spider-Man. And
wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. I had copies of it, but I've never seen the originals, obviously.
I was just like, what is happening? It's like it was such an out-of-body experience too, because you're not thinking about it in the moment. And that's kind of what these, when I get to chat with you guys like this, like I'm living the moment right now, and I'll go back and watch it to edit it, and I go, oh, I still can't believe I just talked with him, I can't believe that Doug wished me a happy birthday, or it's like everybody seems like they were really not just great people then, but great people now. And if you don't mind, I know Brendan just passed, and it was very sad, and it was even sadder because we tried to help the best we could with the GoFundMe, but it just life happens, and
when it's your time, it's your time.
I'm very sorry that happened. I've expressed my condolences to Sharon and, Doug and Mark. I know that Brendan seemed like he was like a really, really good guy and like a really grounded guy. And I was wondering if you had any stories or anything you'd like to share about him.
I wouldn't begin to claim that I was a close friend of Brendan's. I mean, we kept in touch off and on. I haven't spoken to him very much over the years, but I remember him and Sharon, and it's almost impossible to talk about Brendan and Sharon separately. They were a couple, and they were such a great couple. And it's so rare that I think you get the opportunity to work with, that a husband and wife get to work together, and they did, and they got to, and they were, they were clearly two people that were happy together and enjoyed the opportunity to work together. But he was just a good guy. I always recall Brendan just being a solid guy, stand-up guy, personable, humorous, funny, and the sort of person that you, and I think there was, to a certain extent, it was a good group that way. I think I was rather young and wild at the time. I don't think I fit in at that level, but whereas Doug, Brandon, and Mark had a level of maturity and experience that I certainly wasn't exhibiting at that point in time in my life. But I have nothing but good memories of Brandon as an individual. And yes, it's sad when a person passes, and I just can't even begin to imagine the struggle that Sharon is going through, losing someone, a partner that they were together 40, 50 years, as a couple. I can't even begin to imagine how difficult that must be. But he was a great guy to work with, and a great individual, the sort of person you imagine he'd give you the shirt off his back. It was just like great. I remember when he appeared on Star Trek. He had his small role, and it was just like, oh my God, you got to do Star Trek. That's so friggin' awesome. I'd love to have done that. And it was, but good guy, very good guy. Very sorry to have seen him pass.
Yeah, one of my biggest regrets with running the channel is that I was never able to maybe get everybody together collectively on like one of these calls for like a large, thing like that, or over the years, I know there have been talks about maybe doing like Comic-Con or things like that. It would have been nice to be able to have, I know he knew of the fans, and it would have been nice to have that, that collective, everybody together.
It's a funny thing, because in the business, this is the natural thing: is you come together, you meet a group of people, you work on a show, the show ends, and then you disperse. And sometimes you remain friends with people, sometimes you don't. And that's not necessarily because of any character flaw in any person. It's not because, oh, I don't like that person, or I didn't get along with them. It's just the nature of the business. There's that ebb and flow. So it's not often that you're in something where there's the kind of fan base that strongly, wants to see everybody come together, and it would have been an interesting experience to, still would be, for that matter. It certainly is great to know that Doug and Mark and Sharon and even Brendan are well and doing okay, even though, I think Sharon is obviously going through a tough time right now.
Yeah, I'll see what we can do there, but I appreciate you, just sharing your thoughts on Brendan. And I wish I gotten to know him a little bit more over time. It wasn't for me really to, I wouldn't be best friends with him, but it was like this is what I remember from him. And as you said with Sharon, it was this almost like symbiote, really, like relationship, where that's what it seemed like to me anyway. They were just great with each other, and you can see that was the case. I want to lighten up a little bit here. I don't want to go down too much, but if there was a movie that was going to come out there's been talks of one. Would you have any interest in wanting to come back to reprise any sort of role if it's live action?
I don't know that I could. I mean,
I think
it's like I don't think I could T-Bob would still potentially be a voiceover, if they decided to maintain T-Bob.
But if they just put you in a can,
listen, I've done some work where I've been put in situations like that. It's not fun, Costumes like that are not, when I worked on Armageddon, I was a stand-in and special business extra, and the spacesuits that you see in Armageddon were horribly claustrophobic. Not to mention the armadillo, that big machine that they had. When you got into it, you came in through a top hatch, you got strapped into a chair, you were in the suit, and then that was it. There was like, I remember one time when it got so bad because they were doing long distance shots. The guy that was the actor that was supposed to be driving the armadillo was a smoker, and he couldn't stay in for long periods of time. Not to mention he was a fairly large fellow, and it was difficult to get him in the vehicle. So I would be put in the vehicle for the wide shots so that they, because they didn't need him in there. And we were shooting one morning, and with the helmet and the spacesuit inside this enclosed space, the oxygen levels were low. I actually passed out.
Wow.
And I woke up, and they had called the shot and broke for lunch. And this was in this set that was like a football field large. It was the asteroid set. So I wake up and I'm strapped into this thing inside this suit, so I can't get out. And I'm in this massive set. And there's nobody there. It's hysterical. Somebody finally realized. They went, oh God, we left Graeme in the armadillo. And they came back and got me out.
I don't mean to laugh at it.
It was hysterical.
Like, how would you just leave? Oh, it's lunchtime.
Well, because the work that you're doing as an extra I'm not that important. I'm a prop.
Yeah.
I'm there to fill a space while they're shooting. So no one's talking to me. I'm just sitting in a vehicle in the background of a shot. And the guy that put me in there like 2 hours ago. So everybody and somebody else thinks somebody else must have taken care of it. So it's not as impersonal as it sounds, or absurd. It's just the nature of the business in that respect, and and getting stuck in there. But yeah, so I wouldn't want to do T-Bob in a can. No, I don't think that would be my first choice as a comeback role.
That'll be all CGI.
And I don't know if Brad had aged a bit, perhaps, but I think part of the thing that made Brad cool was that youth. I mean, if they came back and redid M.A.S.K, I'd love to see it darker and edgier. I mean, one of the great things about
a lot of people want to see is
I think superheroes are interesting because of that sort of almost schizophrenic dynamic between their personalities and their superhero personalities. Again, I always thought that the one thing I loved about what's his name's first Batman,
Keaton.
Keaton's Batman was how sort of off he was. The sort of psychosis of a person. I remember that there's a great scene in which I think he's in that hall with all of the suits of armor, and somebody's sort of looking at him going like, "What's with all the suits of armor?" And he suddenly looks around and goes, "Oh yeah," like he isn't even cognizant of the world he lives in. And I just thought that was incredible, that dichotomy between what takes a person and it makes them want to do that kind of thing. I
remember that scene. It was, I think Vicky Vale and the guy, Robert Wool. I think they were.
Yeah. I think that's right.
They were in there like walking around, and he came in. He's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, oh.
I don't know. I'm not even sure I've been in this room before. But that sort of that darkness is always fascinated me. I think there's that part of ourselves that want revenge or want recognition, but want to be the champion of something, and how we are in our lives and how we are in the darkness of our mind is often two different things.
So you would want to see then something where, obviously if, the M.A.S.K cartoon, none of the shots really ever landed. Nobody died. You want to see something along the lines of, and I'm, if I'm misquoting, or I'm not saying this is what you want to see, but you want to see something that really delves into the, the character development, and you want to see why these people are doing what they're doing. Essentially.
Well, look, I love action films. Always been a big fan of them. But what drives the interest in the action is the character.
Yeah.
If your antagonist and your protagonist are boring, then who cares if they beat each other up? Or who cares if there's a confrontation? But when we, what makes really great, why is Die Hard so great? Well, if it weren't for Hans Gruber, I wouldn't care who was crawling around in ductwork,
Love Hans Gruber.
Yeah, it's those counterpoints, and the fact that like I'd love to see, if Brad were to come back, I'd love to see Brad. What if he were a rock and roll star? What if the impression of him was some guy that was shooting up just before he runs onto the stage, and that everyone thinks of him as one thing, but in actual fact he's something else, and how to maintain that. How does any human being maintain that kind of dichotomy?
So that kind of like people think of him as aloof, essentially, because he's always missing, or he's
unreliable. He's not, it's not fun.
But in reality, he's probably one of the most reliable people you'll ever know.
Exactly. And the sacrifice he chooses to make, as an individual, in order to maintain this need, to do this without anybody, recognizing that. I think those kind of things are interesting. And particularly in the good characters, because the bad guys get just to be bad guys. They rarely have alter egos where they're really positive people on the outside. The dicks are always the dicks, but the people trying to be good are confronted with that fact that to be good, you have to make these moral choices that sometimes are ethically in gray areas, and that's interesting. And as much as I don't think of M.A.S.K as a bad cartoon series, it's rather sanitized in respect to any of that kind of stuff. That wasn't its point at the time.
That's a really good way of looking at it. Like, as a character, I like that a lot. That could be like, so if M.A.S.K had been brought back already, and let's say it was successful in a way, that could have been like Brad's origin movie, like, if it was something along those lines like that, or that's a really cool dynamic. I like that a lot. One of the other fan questions that came up was, would Brad Turner pick Vanessa Warfield or Gloria Baker?
Vanessa.
Yeah. So,
again, if he were a real rock star, he'd be the bad boy,
Yeah. People ask that question, and I'm like, I don't know, but a lot of people in the second season, there seemed to be a little bit of like, a little bit of chemistry building. There wasn't a lot of continuity with the cartoon. There was some, but it seemed like there was some chemistry building with Brad and Vanessa, and then it only went 10 episodes, and then that was it. So people, I guess, often wondered how that would carry. Would Brad ever cross over to Venom's side? I don't know. What do you think? You think Brad would ever turn sides?
That's an interesting storyline. That's certainly an interesting storyline. I think, the idea of what would draw Brad, but this is this idea of like, when you go to create a cartoon in the 80s, who knows? Maybe the writers were thinking all sorts of things, but what you can do, in that period of time. Again, when I look at some of where we've gone in respect to what cartoons can do, what television can do, You know, when you look at what you can say now versus what you could say in the 80s, it makes sense that some of this stuff didn't get, you know, why it's not going to get explored. You know, Brad's going to be, you know, the whole thing is going to be as sanitized as possible because that's what you're allowed to do. And that makes sense in respect to the product you're trying to deliver to the audience you're trying to deliver it to. But the idea of afterwards speculating to go, what would be interesting, you know, would be really fascinating to go, what would take a character and push him, you know, towards something that was what you thought was against his ethic and moral values. And again, isn't that sort of what so much of, you know, of what we watch, you know, as fans of any serial or episodic or cartoons or Star Wars or that, is that balance, you know? It's interesting what drove Anakin to the dark side. It's interesting the battle that Luke has, you know? These are things that we as individuals, you know, experience not on a great dramatic level, but, you know, do I tell the guy that he gave me the wrong change back? You know, there are our little moral dilemmas, but we face them in all sorts of different ways. You know, do I, you know, is this something where it's, you know, it's a moral and ethical question that I can find a gray area in, or do I need to toe the line? And what would push me in that direction?
It's very deep.
Sorry.
No, I mean, it really is. It's,
you know.
So I think after this, we'll talk offline about our Brad Turner origin movie.
Origin stories, yeah, you know.
But no, it would be interesting, you know, if there was a movie or something like that. Doug brought up, Doug's like, I don't know if I don't know if I could do my own stunts, you know, things, you know, joking around, but he's like, maybe we're there in the background somewhere. Maybe we're, you know, handing out.
It'd be fun to be involved. It's fun to be recognized, but I think you've also got to allow for the fact that, you know, that it would be somebody else's turn. You know?
Correct. No, yeah,
you know,
100%.
It's another person's opportunity to, you know, to give their interpretation of a role. You know, I was lucky enough to get to play the cartoon version, you know, back in the 80s. Someone else would have the opportunity, I think, to do that now. I mean, yes, it would be fun to be engaged in something like that. It's, you know, filmmaking is a fascinating thing, you know.
Maybe they can maybe they'll use you as a as a tester as a tester for a suit. That's really tight.
They can sit me in the background until there's not enough oxygen wherever I am and I pass out again. Yeah, exactly. I have expertise in that area. Certainly I could pitch that.
I know. You're lined up for that. Well, it's been a real honor. We're about an hour in, and I usually like to kind of stop there. I feel like we could probably go for a little bit longer, but I want to keep you on a beautiful snowy Sunday afternoon. But Graeme, I really do, you know, appreciate the contributions that, you know, you did so many years ago, and when you agreed to do the interview for the text one, helped with the charity auction that we did, and your time now. You know, these moments here are what make me doing this show, this channel, and keeping it going, but what really drive me. And knowing just like I said earlier, like how great all of you are, to be selfless with your time, and knowing that you don't really know me, but you know that I run this website for a thing that you did 35 years ago, and it really is it's a great honor. And I just want to say thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome, Bill. I mean, it works both ways. I mean, it's a rarity, you know, I think, to do anything in your life where there are people that credit you for having done that, you know, and that you know, that I'm very grateful for that. I'm really pleased that people, you know, thought M.A.S.K was something that was worth being a fan of, you know, that got to be involved in something that 35 years later, there are people go, wow, I watched that as a kid. That has a real impact, you know, and I get that. So, you know, in a way, you're keeping alive for me something that I did in my past, you know, and by recognizing that, you do me a great honor and a service by allowing me to to be able to talk about it and to say, yeah, it was a fun part of my life. I'm lucky to have gotten the chance to do it. So thank you. And thank all the fans out there.
Yeah, there's a good amount, and a lot of them do like Brad Turner. And what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to go watch Armageddon and see. I'm going to see if I can.
I worked on that thing for almost 9 months, and I didn't even get credit on it. And I'm in all sorts of aspects of it. You can. It's like
I'm going to see if I can find a blooper reel and see if they
when he throws the wrench off into the atmosphere. That's actually me throwing the wrench.
Oh, okay.
When you see Willis put the patch in Ben Affleck's thing before he pushes it in, that's actually my hand doing that.
Okay.
I know. So there's all sorts of places where it's me, but you'll never
Bruce
know.
Willis is taking credit for stuff that's not his, you know.
He didn't do that. He never threw that wrench. I did that.
Yeah. Oh, Graeme, again.
Yeah, Willis gets all the credit. I don't know how that happens.
He's a pretty good actor, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's okay.
There is that. I'll give you that.
He's okay. You know.
Yeah.
If you might have seen some of his movies over time, but yeah.
Yeah, but come on. You know.
But again,
who threw the wrench?
Thank you very much, sir.
You're so welcome.
This time's been great, and if you ever need anything from the M.A.S.K community, reach out. And I hope to actually meet you in person one day soon too, as well.
Well, I think it was a wonderful thing that the M.A.S.K community stepped up for Brendan and Sharon, and clearly, you've got good people.
It's a good community, and I know they're going to really appreciate hearing you and basically hearing Brad Turner talk throughout this entire episode too. So they're probably tired of my voice, so it's good to have that. But again, thanks for being a part of this, and thank you for watching. And please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to help keep M.A.S.K alive. And this is Bill, and that's Graeme McKenna, and we'll talk to you later. Spectrum sky.